the young son of Odin, Thor, embarks on a quest with his brother Loki to retrieve the legendary sword of Surtur. Thor fights members of the Einherjar in an arena in Asgard. The crowd cheers as Odin's oldest son pushes back the warriors. The Einherjar are the realm's adventurers and often leave Asgard on quests. As Thor fights, his friend Sif watches over, shaking her head as she is not impressed. Thor fights but foolishly drops his weapon. Noticing he is unarmed, one of the Einherjar picks it up for him. The fight continues, and Thor wins. He begins walking back to his quarters and meets with his brother Loki. Loki was impressed with the fight, but suggests the grip of his sword is too slick. Later on, he meets with Sif and asks her if she saw his victory. She says she left after his opponents threw him back his weapon. Thor gets frustrated and asks what she means. Sif says Thor has never left the castle grounds and suggests that the Einherjar let him win every fight. This angers Thor, who says Sif doesn't believe in him. However, Sif says she is the only one that believes in Thor and says he's never had an honest fight. Now irritated, Thor demands the two duel. He draws his sword as Sif picks up a barn tool. She humiliates the mighty Thor, knocking him on the ground with a bucket on his head, and leaves the barn. On her way out of the barn, she runs into Loki and tells him to stop lying to Thor and making him believe he is something he isn't. Loki says she is perfect for the Valkyries and she flies away on her horse. Meanwhile, a crowd gathers around a group of Einherjar warriors called the Warriors 3. They tell tales of their adventures, captivating every passerby, one of which is Thor. Fandral, the most handsome of the Warriors 3, mockingly congratulates Thor on his victory, saying it pales to the victories won outside the arena. Hagun, the grimmest of the three, asks Thor if he would like to join them on their next quest. Volstagg, the largest in every way of the three, interrupts and ironically says Thor isn't allowed to leave the kingdom. Now feeling embarrassed, Thor leaves in a huff. He returns to his castle to confront his father. He walks in on his council meeting in the throne room. Thor's father, Odin, discusses a new training camp and a secret meeting between Sif and Brunhilde, the leader of the Valkyries. The Valkyries are the ferocious female warriors from Asgard who have exiled themselves, believing men to have no use. The meeting concludes and Thor asks his father's permission to leave the kingdom and join the Warriors 3. Explaining Thor has responsibilities as a prince, Odin does not approve. Thor asks about the Einherjar letting him win in battle, and Odin confirms his suspicions. He was more focused on keeping his appearance among the public than training his son. Thor is saddened at the news that his father does not believe in him, but Odin explains a king's duty is not to draw a sword but to know when to avoid battle entirely. Thor leaves the room. Later, Thor meets with Algrim, advisor to Odin and Thor's close friend. Algrim is of the Dark Elf species, a species that was oppressed and wiped out by the giants of Jotunheim. Thor confides in Algrim, telling him he is going against his father's wishes and participating in the Warrior's Test. The Warrior's Test is a treacherous quest that is performed every year. Rarely has someone perished while seeking out this quest. Algrim says this is because the quest is to retrieve the legendary sword of Surtur, which no one has ever found. With great ambition, Thor says the journey is the test, not retrieving the sword. Algrim seems nervous about this. He explains that the quest will take Thor to Jotunheim, the realm of the Frost Giants, and Asgard's truce with the Frost Giants is fragile at best, meaning Thor will have to remain completely secret and hidden while in their realm. The two agree to keep this a secret and Thor thanks Algrim before leaving. Thor meets with his brother Loki as he practices his magic. He asks his younger brother how his magic is coming along and Loki responds positively. This excites Thor, who says they are going on an adventure. Loki, being the good brother he is, reluctantly accepts this. The two brothers sneak aboard the vessel of the Warriors 3 as it sets sail, leaving the shimmering realm and sailing into the stars. Later in the night, Odin notices his two sons are missing and meets with Algrim. Algrim shows concern as he lies and says he doesn't know where they are. The two share a heart-to-heart conversation. Odin asks if he is doing the right thing with his sons. Although not a father, Algrim says it's time for Odin's sons to make their own mistakes and learn from them. The ship stops at a bar and the two brothers enter to confront the Warriors 3. While talking, Loki provokes a patron of the bar and a fight breaks loose. Thor and Loki help the Warriors 3 win the fight and get away, but accidentally set fire to the building in the process. Filled with joy, Loki laughs and the others join in. Satisfied and done adventuring for the day, the Warriors 3 insist on heading back to Asgard. The brothers convince the Warriors to carry on with the adventure and head to Jotunheim. In Asgard, Sif trains with the Valkyries and Brunhilde. She says to Sif that her concentration lies on Thor and not on her training, warning her that men are of no use and dangerous. The adventurers crash their ship in Jotunheim and carry on walking through the tundra, crossing treacherous frozen environments. Thor fills with exhaustion and disbelief, now under the impression that Algrim was right and Surtur's legendary sword can't be found. Loki asks Thor if he remembers the tale of Odin defeating Surtur. They bond over the story and even remember where their father said he defeated Surtur, and determine the exact spot the sword should be. They find a cave at the foot of a mountain and enter, suspecting this is the spot. They enter as Volstagg grows tired, taking a rest on the ground. Suddenly the ice underneath the group gives way, causing them to plummet to the cavern below. At Asgard, Odin sits in his throne room. The guards enter with a man seeking the king's audience. The man is the owner of the bar, and explains that the sons of Odin destroyed it and deserve to pay for it. In the cavern, the group picks themselves up and continues to search. Eventually, they come across what they were looking for. The legendary sword of Surtur hangs from the ceiling like an icicle, each group member commenting on how much bigger it is than they thought. The legendary fire sword of Surtur is called Elderstall and automatically adjusts to the user's hand. Hagen throws his mace at it in a successful attempt to free it. The giant sword comes crashing down and falls to the ground. Thor walks over and touches it, creating a ball of light and shrinking the sword to fit his hand. While holding it, it shakes and bursts into flames. A fire beam shoots out of it, and Thor uses this to break a hole through the mountain, saying it is the most powerful thing he has ever wielded. They retreat from the mountain and determine what to do next. Loki insists on returning to Asgard, but for that, they will need a new means of travel, and Thor decides they should make their way north. Loki grows nervous as he realizes that's where the Valkyries are and says they will be lucky to leave with their lives. Knowing Sif will be there and help them, Thor says they will be safe. On their way through the snowy wasteland, they get pursued by frost giants. In an attempt to get away, Loki trips and falls. Thor turns around and draws the fire sword, saying to the giants that they mean no harm and just want to pass. Thor panics and accidentally shoots a fire beam from the sword, eliminating both giants. Other frost giants witness this and inform their king that Odin's sons defeated 2 of his sentries. The king of the frost giant prepares his army. Full of regret and shame, Thor and the others flee. They meet with Sif in the Valkyrie training camp. Thor desperately asks for her help home when they are caught and knocked out by the other Valkyries. The frost giants travel into Asgard and are greeted by Odin. Odin asks what they are doing in his realm and says it's a violation of their truce. King Thrym explains that the truce has already been broken by Odin's son's actions, and tells him Thor has the sword of Surtur. The frost giants will declare war on Asgard if the sword is not returned. Planning what to do next, Odin meets to talk with Algrim. Algrim volunteers to return to Svartalfheim, where his people were oppressed, to return Odin's sons. Thor wakes up in chains at the Valkyrie camp. Brunhilde interrogates him and the group, accusing them of being spies. The hero's situation looks unwell as frost giants attack. The Valkyries manage to hold off most of the giants. Sif saves Thor and frees him from his chains. Brunhilde decides she can fight off the giants, and gives the group transportation. Before they leave, Brunhilde tells Sif to only return when she's ready. In Svartalfheim, Algrim and the Einherjar meet with Thor and his group. Thor is happy to see his friend again, but Algrim tells him of the situation they have created. Thor doesn't think anyone should have Surtur's sword, even the frost giants, so he agrees to give the sword to Algrim. Feeling the power of the sword in his hands, Algrim feels his rage toward frost giants boiling in his veins. Algrim tells the story of the war his people had with the frost giants. Odin refused to help them, even when they asked. The Dark Elves had to turn to Surtur and use his sword. Only then did Odin join the war. But they fought to oppose the elves, not join them. By defeating Surtur, Odin sealed the fate of the Dark Elves. Algrim is filled with hatred and fire spills out of the sword, eliminating the Einherjar that accompanied him as he makes his escape. Thor, Loki, Sif, and the Warriors 3 gather the horses and agree to defeat Algrim and stop this war. Algrim returns to Asgard and tricks Odin into meeting with him. Algrim immediately attacks Odin using the sword and the two battle. Odin takes blow after blow as the two destroy their surroundings with overwhelming power. At this same time, the war on Asgard begins. Frost giants hurl boulders over the walls, turning buildings into rubble. The heroes return, and seeing his kingdom in chaos, Thor rushes to the castle. Algrim is about to lay the final blow on Odin, but Thor steps in at the last second. The two fight as fire and lightning shoot out in all directions. Algrim begins using the power of the sword to snuff all the torches and lanterns in the room, eliminating all light. Thor's lightning-imbued weapon is the only thing that illuminates this haunted throne room. Algrim dashes past Thor, striking him with each pass. Knowing Algrim as well as he does, Thor stops for a moment to anticipate his next move. He stands in silence as he turns around with haste and hurls his spear, pinning Algrim to the wall. He lets him down and decides to spare him, but a fire blast comes from behind Thor, defeating Algrim. Loki stands there holding the sword of Surtur. Filled with the feeling of betrayal and guilt, he gets comforted by Thor. Thor tells him to stay here and watch their father. Thor, in hopes of ending the conflict, rushes outside to the war currently being waged. He speaks with King Thrym, returning Surtur's sword and offering himself as a prisoner. They take the sword but ask where Odin is. Thor explains Algrim's betrayal and says his father is in critical condition. King Thrym admirably accepts the peace offering, effectively ending the war. He relieves Thor from being his prisoner and says he has saved countless lives by returning the sword. Meanwhile, Loki sits in his temple and practices magic. Thor comes to talk to him and doesn't want him to lament his actions, explaining he was protecting the family. Loki says he was seeking vengeance and is convinced he would have acted the way Algrim did. Not entirely fond of this revelation, Thor says who knows what people are capable of under those circumstances, and leaves the room. Thor visits his injured father, Odin. He expresses the regret he feels for starting a war. Odin agrees that he started a war, but says he also learned the value of peace even when its costs can be so great. Because of this, their kingdom has never stood on firmer ground, and tells Thor he has done the kingdom proud. The warriors three continue their old antics as they tell tales of this great adventure in the town square. Thor stops by the stables to visit with Sif. Their attitude toward each other seems to have softened as they flirt. Thor says now that Sif is part of the Valkyries he wants a rematch. They are about to duel when Thor pulls her in, and they kiss.